Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel, and Mirz Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Mem Hey Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we pick up today near the bottom of Mem Hey Amud Aleph, Siman Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Aleph. We already did the Mechaber. We already did Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Aleph. We're going to be picking up with Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Beis. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Batzara Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Alehem, V'yotziim Mitzara L'Rvacha Me'afelo La'oiro Mishiba L'Geula, Hashta Bagolo V'zman Kariv and Emar Armein. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, and also for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, and Yoel ben Michal. Those are soldiers, relatives of mine, who have been called up and are in harm's way. Mirz Hashem, the Rebbe Hashem should protect them together with all of our other brothers and sisters that find themselves in harm's way, boots on the ground in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem, Hinei Lo Yonav Lo Yishan Shemer Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem should protect Gans Klal Yisrael B'chol Makom Shehem. Okay, so the Mechaber said over here in Sif Aleph, Kishayavay lebeisai, when one comes home Friday night, Yemaher le'echol miyad, he should see to it to sit down and eat the Suda immediately. The Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Aleph explained to us that what this means, that you should le'echol miyad, you should eat the Suda immediately. The driving factor over here is not really to eat the Suda immediately. The driving factor is the need to make Kiddush immediately. Why is there a need to make Kiddush immediately? So in the words of the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Aleph, the Chavetz Chaim told us, Kidei sheyizkar Shabbos be'ez techilas knisasai. We want to mention Shabbos, we want to fulfill Kiddush and mention Shabbos, be B'kayim Zochar es Yom Shabbos lekadishai. We want to do it as close to the time that Shabbos came in as possible. So we were in the Beis HaKnesses, we were in Shul, we were Makabel Shabbos, we davened Ma'ariv, we brought in Shabbos. Now right away, let's go make Kiddush. And the Chavetz Chaim said, Kol kama de makdeminan le tvei odif. The sooner we could come and bring in Shabbos with Kiddush, we already want Makabel Shabbos, but the sooner we could proclaim Shabbos and fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, the better. That's what we learned yesterday. Now, the last word of Sif Aleph in the Mechaber is miyad. You should come in and you should eat immediately. Miyad means right away. Let's take a look here at Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Beis, Dibur HaMaschil miyad. First, the Chavetz Chaim points out, remember, we learned earlier in Siman Reish Samach Zayin that there are times when halachically it's problematic to come home and right away sit down and eat. Why? Let's say you made early Shabbos. If you made early Shabbos, so yes, we say that you could daven Ma'ariv after Plag, even if it's before Shkia, but as far as the mitzvah saseh of Kriyas Shema Shalayla, the mitzvah say of Kriyas Shema Shalayla, most poskim agree that you're not yoitza until after Tzeisak Echavim. So here you have a mitzvah say daraisa, Kriyas Shema Shalayla, and you haven't been mekayim it yet. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah pointed out to us in Siman Reish Samach Zayin, if you come home from shul and it's within a half an hour of Tzeisak Echavim, it's not so pashut that you could sit down and start a Suda, because there are certain activities you're not allowed to engage in when you're already within a half an hour of the Zman of when you could be Mekayim a mitzvah say daraisa that you have not yet fulfilled. So you have a mitzvah say daraisa of Kriyas Shema Shalayla, you haven't fulfilled it yet, according to many poskim, because you said Kriyas Shema, but you said it even before Shkia, forget Tzeisak Echavim. So according to many poskim, you haven't been yoitze your chiyuv of the mitzvah say daraisa of Kriyas Shema Shalayla. Now, if it's within a half an hour of Tzeisak Echavim, so you're already within a half an hour of the Zman when you could be Mekayim the mitzvah. One of the activities you're not allowed to engage in now is you're not allowed to sit down to a Sudas Kva. You can't sit down to a Sudas Kva now before you yoitze the mitzvah say of Kriyas Shema Shalayla. Says the Mishnah Berurah here is Katan Beis. Miyad, umikam hakoim, me'anachai, nevertheless, notwithstanding the fact that the Mechaber says you should come home and you should eat immediately, it is proper, likreis Kriya Shema mikodim, that you should first cover your chiyuv of Kriya Shema. Im mistapik shebebeis hakneses lo kara abizmana. If you even have a suffix that maybe when you said Kriya Shema in shul it wasn't tzesek kechavim yet, for sure, if you know for certain it wasn't tzesek kechavim. But even if you have a suffix, maybe you didn't make Shabbos early, that you davened Ma'ariv before Plag after Shkia, maybe you davened later than that, but you're mesupik. I don't know if it was tzesek kechavim yet when I said Kriya Shema. So then, before you sit down to the Suda, you have to make sure to cover your mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shalayla. V'ayle'el b'siman reish samach zayin b'Mishnah Berurah sif katan vav, where we discussed this in greater detail. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to take us on a little bit of a deep dive into the chiyuv of Kiddush. Says the Mishnah Berurah, very yesodistic Mishnah Berurah, this Mishnah Berurah. This is something that we do every week. We make Kiddush, we should understand what it's based on. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Kosav Rambam, Perek Chav Tes, Melech Shabbos, Halacha Aleph through Vav. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Chav Tes, Mitzvahs asay min HaTorah lekadesh es yom HaShabbos b'dvarim. There is a specific mitzvah asay daraisa to be mekadesh Shabbos verbally, to go ahead and make the verbal declaration of Kiddush. That's a mitzvah asay daraisa. Shenemar, what pasuk is it based on? Zachar es yom HaShabbos lekadshay. This is in Yaseres Adibris in Parshas Yisroi. Zachar es yom HaShabbos lekadshay. Kolaymar, what do those words mean? Says the Chavetz Chaim. Zacharehu, you have to mention Shabbos verbally. Zechiras shvach v'kiddush. The Rambam makes note of two things that we need to speak about when we make Kiddush. We have to mention the shvach, the praise of Shabbos, that Shabbos is different than every other day of the week, that Shabbos is kadosh as opposed to the other days of the week, the kiddush, and we need to be mekadesh Shabbos. We need to make a declaration of the sanctity of Shabbos. So that's the chiyuv daraisa. The chiyuv daraisa is a verbal recitation of Kiddush. Umidivrei Sofrim, then there's a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. Umidivrei Sofrim shetei zechirazu al koshel yayin. Midrabanan, there's a requirement that this Kiddush should be made over a koshel yayin. So the Rambam's telling us that when it comes to Kiddush, you have two distinct chiyuvim. You have a chiyuv daraisa. The chiyuv daraisa is just a verbal recitation of Kiddush. That's the chiyuv daraisa. Chiyuv d'Rabbanan is that Chazal said this recitation should be made al hakois. You should have a koshel yayin. V'chein kasra Taisus. The Taisus writes the same thing. Besukah daf lamed ches ubenazir daf talid. Da'al yayin hu rak b'Rabbanan, that the need to have a koshel yayin by Kiddush to make Kiddush al hayayin. That's not part of the chiyuv daraisa. That's only a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. Okay. Now the Magen Avram tells us that there are a couple of very interesting ramifications of this distinction. Because of the Magen Avram writes, the lefizeh, according to this, that you could be mekayim your chiyuv daraisa just with a verbal recitation, and the need for alakois is only d'Rabbanan. The lefizeh midaraisa b'kiddush she'omer b'tfilah sagi. Really, you could be mekayim your chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush by davening Ma'ariv. When you daven Ma'ariv and you daven the Shemona Esrei, right, you're going to say Vayechulu inside the Shemona Esrei. So says the Magen Avram, you could be Yoitzi your chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush in your davening. The kroksiv Zachar es yom HaShabbos v'harei Zachar esay. The pasuk midaraisa just tells you Zachar es yom HaShabbos akacha. You need to mention it verbally. All right, you did that in your Shemona Esrei. How about Kiddush b'makom suda? How about Kiddush ala kois? Says the Magen Avram, the Kiddush b'makom suda midrabanan. You have to say the Kiddush b'makom suda is only a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. That's not part of the chiyuv daraisa. K'moshe kasav abeis Yosef b'siman reish samach. Okay. The Hevi Magen Avram raya lozem in a Gemara the yotzim in HaTorah b'tfila, and the Magen Avram goes on to bring a raya from the Gemara that you could be yotzi your chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush simply by davening Ma'ariv. Oh, now some ramifications. Ramification number one. Okay, therefore, im safek loyim kiddush oloi. Let's say somehow somebody has a suffix whether or not he made Kiddush. I don't know. Somehow he came home, he fell asleep, he woke up, he's confused. He doesn't know he made Kiddush, he didn't make Kiddush, he has a suffix. Says the Mishnah Berurah, well, let's do the math. He has a suffix whether or not he made Kiddush, but he doesn't have a suffix whether or not he davened. So if he davened, he was already B'kayim, his mitzvah say Daraisa of Kiddush, he was B'kayim Zacharis Yom Shabbos L'Katshai. What's left? The Chiv D'Rabbanan of Kiddush B'Makom Suda and Kiddush Al Hayayin. Well, that's a D'Rabbanan. He has a suffix whether he made Kiddush, that's a suffix D'Rabbanan. Suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula. By a suffix D'Rabbanan, we're going to go L'Kula, especially over here where there's a bracha involved. That would also be suffix brachas L'Hakal. We're not going to go ahead and tell you to make a bracha on a D'Rabbanan, on a suffix. So says the Magen Avram, in that case, al kenim suffix loy kiddush aloi. If a person has a suffix whether or not he made kiddush, ain't tzarich lachzer lekadesh. He doesn't have to go ahead and make kiddush to sveika d'Rabbanan lekula, because this is only a suffix d'Rabbanan. So that's ramification number one. If you tell me that the Chiyuv Daraisa is only a verbal recitation of kiddush, which you could be yoitza with your davening in Ma'ariv, and the need for Kiddush B'Makom Suda and Kiddush Alayayin is only a D'Rabbanan, so then if you know that you davened Ma'ariv, you have a suffix whether or not you made Kiddush when you came home, so in Ma'ariv, you covered your Chiyuv Daraisa. Now you have a suffix whether or not you covered your Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. Okay, suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula, don't make Kiddush. Weiter, says the Magen Avram, another ramification. Gam, the Magen Avram also says, the Katan Shehigia L'Chinuch, if you have a cotton that's already the age that he's a Gia L'Chinuch, so if you have a son who's 6 or 7 years old, so there's already a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan of Chinuch, Gam, the cotton Shehigia L'Chinuch, Yachal L'Hoitzi L'Fi Zeh, Afilu L'Godel B'Kiddush, Im HaGodel Hispal Kfar. Says the Magen Avram, if you have a cotton that's Higia L'Chinuch, so this cotton that's Higia L'Chinuch has a Chiyuv Midrabbanan of Kiddush. Now we know there's a very well-established rule that for one person to be moitzi another person in a chiyuv, in an obligation, they have to have the same level of chiyuv. So if Ruvain and Shimon both have a chiyuv daraisa on something, Ruvain can be moitzi Shimon, Shimon can be moitzi Ruvain. But let's say you have a place where one person has a chiyuv d'Rabbanan and the other person has a chiyuv daraisa. Oh, in that case you have a problem. A person who's only mechuyev in something midrabanan cannot be moitzi somebody who himself has a chiyuv daraisa. So if Reuven is a chiyuv daraisa on something, Shimon only has a chiyuv darabanan, Shimon can't be moitzi Reuven. And logically we can understand that. Shimon, who has a chiyuv darabanan, cannot be moitzi Reuven, who has a much more stringent chiyuv. He has a chiyuv daraisa. You can't come with your chiyuv darabanan and be moitzi me in a chiyuv daraisa. So says the Magen Avram, let's do the math. A cotton who's a Gia L'Chinuch has a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. Okay, so this cotton has a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan in Kiddush. Now let's say you have a Godel. A Godel has a Chiyuv Daraisa, but the Chiyuv Daraisa is only on the verbal recitation of Kiddush. So let's say you have a Godel who already davened Ma'ariv. He already disposed of his Chiyuv Daraisa. He fulfilled his Chiyuv Daraisa in Ma'ariv. Now when he comes home for Kiddush, he only has a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan to make Kiddush B'Makom Suda and Kiddush Alayayin. Well, in that case, his level of Chiyuv and the cotton's level of Chiyuv are the same. So then that means that the cotton could be moitzi the Godel in Kiddush, as long as the Godel already davened Ma'ariv. Right? If the Godel davened Ma'ariv, so he took care of his Chiyuv Daraisa. He's only left with a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. So they're the same. They both have a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. If the Godel did not daven Ma'ariv, then he's still carrying a Chiyuv Daraisa. Since he's carrying a Chiyuv Daraisa, the cotton can't be moitzi him. Let's see this inside. Says the Mishnah Berurah Gam. The Mishnah Berurah also says, the cotton shehigia l'chinuch, if you have a cotton shehigia l'chinuch, so he's carrying a chiyuv midrabanan, yakal lahoitzi lefizeh afilu legadol b'kiddush. It turns out that he could be moitzi a gadol in kiddush im hagadol hispal kvar, if the gadol already davened. So he already disposed of his chiyuv daraisa. He's only left with chiyuv d'Rabbanan. The cotton shehigia l'chinuch also is carrying a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. The cotton can be moitzi the gadol. So says the Magen Avram. Now there's a very interesting Sharet Zion over here. Sharet Zion ice cotton base. So first he brought this down from the Derech HaChaim. But then he says a very fascinating thing. He says, but there's a caveat to this. He says, do the math. The Kos of Sham, the Derech HaChaim also writes, Davke im akoton lo hispal adayin. This only works, we said that this works if the Gadol already davened the Ma'ariv. If the Gadol already davened the Ma'ariv, he already took care of his Chiyav Daraisa, he's only left with the Chiyav Darabanan. And the Cotton also has a Chiyav Darabanan. We didn't mention anything about the Cotton. Did the Cotton daven Ma'ariv or not? Says the Chavetz Chaim in the Sharitzion from the Derech Chaim, this only works if the Cotton did not yet daven Ma'ariv. So the Gadol already davened Ma'ariv, but the Cotton did not daven Ma'ariv. Why? Because says the Chavetz Chaim like this. Let's say the Cotton already davened Ma'ariv. Well, if the Cotton already davened Ma'ariv, what Chiv is he left with? He's left with a Chiv Darabanan of making Kiddush al Hayayin, b'mokum Suda, and he's only Chayiv in that Darabanan, Midarabanan, because he's a Cotton that's a Gil Chinuch. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that means that his Chiv is based on two Darabanans. His Chiv is based on A, the Darabanan that a Cotton Higil Chinuch has a Chiv in anything. That's one Darabanan. And now, since he's a Cotton Higil Chinuch and Midarabanan, he's Chayiv in Mitzvahs, so now he's Chayiv in a Chiv Darabanan of Kiddush B'makom Suda and Kiddush Alayayin. But the Gadol, who already davened Ma'ariv, he has a single Darabanan. He doesn't need to come on to he's a Gadol, so he's Chayiv in all mitzvahs already. He has a Darabanan that he has to dispose of. He has a Chiyav Darabanan of Kiddush B'makom Suda, Kiddush Alayayin. But that's a single Darabanan. The Cotton has a double Darabanan. Now, since the Cotton has a double Darabanan and the Gadol has a single Darabanan, it turns out that the Gadol's Chiyav is bigger than the Cotton's Chiyav, and therefore the Cotton can't be Mitzi the Gadol. It's just very fascinating. You see how technical halacha is? You got to do the math to figure it out and see how it works. So in any case, what we have over here so far in the Mishnah Berurah is, so we have the Rambam and Tosfos that say that the Chiyav of Kiddush is comprised of two different levels of Chiyav. You have a Chiyav Daraisa, Zachar Yom Shabbos Kachoy, which is just covered by a verbal recitation of Kiddush, which you can even be Mekayim with your Shmon Esrei in Ma'ariv. You're already Mekayim, your Chiyav Daraisa of Kiddush. Then there's a Chiyav Darabanan, Kiddush B'makom Suda, and Kiddush al Hayayin. Yeah, you need a kais. That's a Chiyav Darabanan. Says the Magen Avram, two ramifications. Ramification number one, what do you do if you have a suffix whether or not you made Kiddush? If you didn't daven Ma'ariv, okay, suffix Daraisa. But if you know that you daven Ma'ariv, you're only left with a suffix Darabanan. You have a suffix whether or not you were already Mekayim, your Chiyav Darabanan. Okay, suffix Darabanan Lahakal. We're not going to tell you to make Kiddush over again. Ramification number two, could a Cotton be Moitzi a Gadol in Kiddush? Said the Mishnah Berurah, well, if the Cotton already daven Ma'ariv, if the Gadol already davened Ma'ariv, he already took care of his Chiyav Daraisa. He's only left with a Chiyav Darabanan. You have a Cotton that's a Gil Chinuch. He also has a Chiyav Darabanan. So now the Cotton could be Moitzi the Gadol. That's what we're up to over here. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'ulam, however, yesh lefakfek bazeh harbe. There's a lot that we could dispute about this Magen Avram. First of all, says the Chavetz Chaim, to hakayman la'el b'simen samach sif daled. We already learned in Chelik Aleph, Siman Samach, Hilchas Kriya Shema, Sif Daled, the mitzvahs tzrichis kavana lotzeis ba'asiyas hamitzvah. That we paskin that mitzvahs tzrichis kavana. What kind of kavana? Lotzeis ba'asiyas hamitzvah. There's two different types of mitzvah strichas kavana. Let's take Kriya Shema, for example. One type of mitzvah strichas kavana is, when you say Kriya Shema, do you have to have kavana what you're saying? Do you have to have kavana, pashut, on the words that you're saying? That's one type of mitzvah strichas kavana. But then there's another type of mitzvah strichas kavana, and that is, when you go to say Kriya Shema, and you want to be mekayim your mitzvah say daraisa of Kriya Shema, do you have to have kavana that I'm saying Kriya Shema in order to be mekayim my mitzvah? In other words, what happens if you just go to Shachris and you're just kind of like davening by rote? Maybe you even have kavanah, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You have kavanah on what the words mean. But did you have kavanah that I am reciting Kriya Shema in order to be mekayim my mitzvah say daraisa? When you put on tefillin, did you have kavanah when you put on your tefillin? I'm putting on my tefillin in order to be mekayim my mitzvah say daraisa. Now we paskin mitzvah tzrichas kavanah lotzeis pasiyas mitzvah. That kavanah you need to have in order to be mekayim your mitzvah. You need to have kavanah that what you're doing in order to be mekayim your mitzvah. So now says the Mishnah Berurah, mistama ein miderech ha'olam lechavein lotzeis es mitzvah say de zochar batfil. You're telling me that when somebody was davening Ma'ariv and he said Vayichulu in his Shemona Esrei, he had kavanah to be mekayim his mitzvah say daraisa of Kiddush, Zachar is Yom Shabbos Akadshay? That's not the derech ha'olam, says the Chavetz Chaim. Person's not having kavanah in Shemona Esrei to be mekayim the mitzvah say Kiddush. Kevin sheyesh lo yayin oy pas. He knows he's going home and he has a bottle of Cabernet. He knows that he has lechem mishta that his wife baked. He knows he can make Kiddush al yayin. He knows he can make Kiddush al pas. He's fully intending on going home and making Kiddush. Now I daven Shemona Esrei Ma'ariv. I didn't make Kiddush, so he doesn't have kavanah to be yoytz his mitzvah say darais of Kiddush. V'yakal l'kadosh alei anachakas bebracha kedin. He intends on going home and being mekayim the mitzvah say darais of Kiddush kedasu kedin ala yayin or ala pas. And says the Chavetz Chaim, it's much better for him to be mekayim the mitzvah say daraisa at home on his beautiful silver kais with his Cabernet, mishayetze ata. That's better than being mekayim the mitzvah in Shemona Esrei v'yeh b'loi kais v'shaloi b'makom suda. So what are you telling me? Says the Chavetz Chaim. The Magen Avram is telling me he's making all of these calculations and coming up with these ramifications la halacha to tell you, oh, you daven Ma'ariv, you were already yotzi your mitzvah say darais of Kiddush. Really? You had kavanah to be mekayim your mitzvah say darais of Kiddush? That would be a tremendous aberration. That somebody's going to finish by Esrei and say, Baruch Hashem, I made Kiddush already. No, nobody has that kavanah. Va'oid, continues the Chavetz Chaim, there are many other reasons to disagree with this among an Avram. Like the Chavetz Chaim goes through at length in this very long Bir Halacha that begins on Memhei Amud Aleph. Bir Halacha Dibra Maskel Miyad. It's the whole Amud Aleph. It's almost the whole Amud Beis, a beautiful long Bir Halacha. One of the other points that the Chavetz Chaim makes in the Bir Halacha is we see in Halacha that one of the things that you need in order to be Yotze Kiddush is Eichel Liyetzias Mitzrayim. Now, where do you have it Shemona Esrei? In Shemona Esrei you said Vayichulu. Did you mention Yetzias Mitzrayim? You didn't mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So how do you have the component of Kiddush of Eichel Liyetzias Mitzrayim in Shemona Esrei? Now they speak about maybe by davening Ma'ariv you say Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael in the first bracha after Kriya Shema in Birchas Kriya Shema of Ma'ariv. So you talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim in Ve'amuna Kol Zayis V'Kayim Aleinu. You talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim and then you say Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael. Then in V'Shamaru you mention Shabbos. So maybe that's how you're Mekayim Kiddush by davening Ma'ariv. But definitely there's a lot to pick apart over here. It's not so pashut to say that you're Mekayim the mitzvah say darais of Kiddush and Ma'ariv. So the Mishnah Berurah says there's a lot of reasons that you could take issue with this Magen Avram. Therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, Al Kain, therefore, Yesh limnoya milotzeis yidei Kiddush al yidei katan. You should refrain from having a cotton be moitzi you in Kiddush. Va'afilu im yizoyer hashemei loymar imoy mila b'mila. Even if somebody, a gadol, wants a cotton to be moitzi him in Kiddush, so he says, I remember the Mishnah Berurah says, not a good idea to have a cotton be moitzi you. All right, you know what I'll do? I'll repeat after him word after word. Maybe this guy doesn't know how to read Pashut, to get up on a bencher and make Kiddush. So what he's going to do is, he's going to have the cotton make Kiddush, right? The cotton is going to say, Vayichulu, Vayichulu. And he's going to say it word for word. So now you would think, all right, I'm not really having the cotton be moitzi me. He's reading for me, and I'm repeating it, so I don't really need him. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Even that's not a good idea. Because if the cotton is holding the kais and you're repeating after him word after word, that's not called you making kiddush al yayin. Interestingly enough, by the way, and I think we've had this already before, maybe not. In order to be yoitza, the idea of kiddush al hakais al yayin, you don't really have to be holding the kais. La halacha, if the kais is in front of you when you make kiddush, that's called kiddush al hakais. But if somebody else is holding the kais, that's already more problematic. So over here, you want the cotton to read kiddush for you, and you're going to repeat word after word with him, but he's holding the kais. So you're not being yoitze kiddush al hakais. Unless you also have a kais in front of you. V'dan, you should know, says the Chavetz Chaim, the kiddush al yom tov hu mid'Rabbanan. This is only get to Friday night kiddush on Shabbos, but you should know that kiddush of yom tov is only mid'Rabbanan. When we come yesh like called din kiddush al Shabbos, all of the halachas that we're going to learn, the requirements of kiddush of Shabbos, we can have the same requirements for kiddush of Yom Tov, but kiddush of Yom Tov is only d'Rabbanan. V'im Yom Tov chal be'erev Shabbos, if Friday erev Shabbos is a Yom Tov, ve'ein lo yeh kais echad, and you only have 1 cup of wine available, since Shabbos is a daraisa and Yom Tov is a d'Rabbanan, manicha l'Shabbos, you should save the wine for kiddush of Shabbos, shehu min HaTorah, which is a daraisa, uvi Yom Tov yikadosh al hapas, and you should be bekayim the d'Rabbanan of kiddush on Yom Tov by making kiddush al hapas. Okay, let's go a little bit weiter. Let's turn back to Mem Hey Amud Aleph and let's see the Mechaber Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Noshim chayavos bekiddush. Women have a chiyuv of kiddush. They're obligated in this kiddush daraisa. Afal pi, says the Mechaber, shu mitzvah shazman grama. We know the golden rule is that women are potter from time-dependent mitzvahs. Now, kiddush of Shabbos is certainly a time-dependent mitzvah. You can't be mekayim on Tuesday. So it's certainly a time-dependent mitzvah. So it's a mitzvah asay shazman grama. Normally one would expect that women would be peturais, they would be exempt. Over here, that's not the case. Women are chayiv in kiddush, despite the fact that it's a mitzvah asay shazman grama. Pirish says the Hagah, mitzvah asay atluya bizman. What does that mean? A mitzvah asay shazman grama? It means a time-dependent mitzvah. It explains the Mechaber what is the reason for this aberration? Why tackle? Why are women chayiv in this mitzvah asay shazman grama of kiddush? Mishum, explains the Mechaber, because the iskish zachar lishamar, because we know that in the Aseres HaDibros of Parshas Yisrael, it says Zachar es Yom HaShabbos lekadshei. In the Aseres HaDibros of Parshas Ve'eschanan, it says Shamor es Yom HaShabbos. We know Chazal tell us Zachar v'Shamar b'dibar echad. The Rebbeinu Shalom said Zachar and Shamar simultaneously, and we were able to hear it from him simultaneously. And therefore, we compare the chiyuv that's transmitted to us by the word zachar to the chiyuv that's transmitted to us by the word shamar. We make a hekesh. We compare them halachically. What does that equal, says the Mechaber? Mishum de iskish zachar l'shamar. V'hani nashi, when it comes to women, hayol v'isnehu b'shmira. What do we learn from shamar is Yom HaShabbos lekadshei? Shamar is what transmits to us all of the isurim of Shabbos, the lamites malachos, etc., etc. Now, women are certainly chayiv in all of the isurim of Shabbos. So, hayol v'isnehu b'shmira, since the lesson of the word shamar applies to women, isnehu b'zchira, the lesson of zechira, kiddush, also applies to women. We're going to see the beginning of Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Gimel. We're only going to do the beginning of it because the majority of it is on tomorrow's Dirshu page. So let's begin Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Gimel here on Mem Hey Amud Beis. The iskish zachar l'shamar, because we make a hekesh between the word zachar and the word shamar. The zachar is Yom HaShabbos lekadshei ya'amar b'dibros harishaynos. The pasuk zachar is Yom HaShabbos lekadshei. That was given to us in the first recording of the Aseres HaDibros in Parshas Yisrael. V'shamar es Yom Shabbos Akadshei Amar b'Dibros Achraynos, and the words Shamar es Yom Shabbos Akadshei that was given over to us in the Dibrei Shniyos in Parshas V'eschanan, Shneim b'Dibur Echad Nemru. The Chazal tell us that the Rebbeinu Shalom said them simultaneously. V'Zachar Kai Al Mitzvah Seder Kiddush V'Chanal. What do we learn out from the word Zachar? Zachar es Yom Shabbos Akadshei. That's where the Torah HaKadosh gave us the Mitzvah Seder Rice of Kiddush that we've been discussing. V'Shamar, and then in the Dibur Shniyos in Parshas V'eschanan, Shamar es Yom Shabbos Akadshei, that transmits to us Kai al Shmira Mimalacha. That's where we get all of the Isurim of Shabbos, of the Lamites Malachas. Ukishem shebe'isim malacha bevadai gam nosha b'zaros. Certainly women are obligated in all of the Isurim of Shabbos. Women aren't allowed to do malacha on Shabbos the same way men aren't. Because when it comes to negative commandments, when it comes to a mitzvah, where the Torah HaKadosh transmits to us things that you're not allowed to do, over there's no distinction between things that are time-dependent and things that are not time-dependent. Women are obligated in all mitzvahs loisaseh. Women have all of the Yisurim of the Torah, time-dependent or not. So they're covered by Shamar es Yom Shabbos Akadshei, therefore they're also covered by Zachar. So Kain ba'aseh de Zachar gam noshim mitzuvos. Women are also commanded in the mitzvah aseh daraisa of Kiddush. We're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan on ganz Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should send Yeshua's Refuas Parnasa and Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kol Tzedek b'meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.